So welcome again to our speakers, Gergana Baeva, Vladimir Petkov, and Manolis Idriotakis. Gergana joined us from Berlin, Vladimir from Sofia, and Manolis from Athens, as far as I know, yeah, from Greece. Good. So today's workshop, as I mentioned, is focused on media. We have three very interesting experts that joined the event from different perspectives. Gergana is researcher and person working more on the policy, media policy in Germany. Manolis is journalist and writer, so he will present us this perspective from this side, person working on the media. And Vladimir Petkov comes from the IT sector, let's say, but he's also related with journalism. He runs this this podcast program, Internet Speaking, right? Is that correct in English?
Yeah, it's really funny that you try to translate it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will not take more time, and we start with the first expert that we invited today, and this is Gergana Baeva, as information and the distribution of disinformation through algorithmic curation of the German media authorities. Previously, she researched broadcasting structures and progress, as well as the process of collective identity construction. So now I'm pleased to give the floor to Gergana to present her experience and field of research. Gergana.
Thank you very much, Kale. I'll briefly share my screen, which works from, yes.
Just in the meantime, to mention that, as you probably already noticed, the same family names. Gergana was proposed by Albena Baeva, who is her sister, and she's also, you know, one of our project fellows and one of the people working in the groups covering these topics. So we are very pleased that we have also this relation here. Okay, Gergana.
Okay, so I'm not very used on sharing my screen on Zoom, and each of these video services has its tricks, so I'm not sure. Are you seeing it in the presentation mode? Okay, is it moving?
Yep.
Yes. I see the slides changing. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Because that's not working on every video platform that I've used during the last 1.5 years. So thank you for having me here, and good afternoon to everyone also from me. First, just to position myself or give you some background. First, I'm a social science researcher, so that's the way how I think and how I regard such problems. And second, I work for a media authority that is a regulator body, one of 14 in Germany because of this federalism stuff in Germany. So I also work a lot with lawyers and with law experts, and this is also kind of forming my way of looking at the problems at hand. So I'm going to talk about algorithms and media intermediaries, because if we speak about online media nowadays, I think it's most interesting to speak about media intermediaries. It's a very technical term, and actually it means all of these platforms and infrastructures that are between us as audiences and the content that is there online, media content and outlets, but also all the posts and videos that users produce and upload. So the idea is that between the old world of the media and us as consumers, there are new infrastructures called intermediaries. And that's what have changed the way we consume media and get informed nowadays. And then since the topic is AI. I will especially look into the role of algorithms within media intermediaries. And I chose as a title, Teething Problems and Lasting Biases, to look if the problems that we encounter with algorithms on these platforms is something typical for the early development of technology, something that one can manage and work with and solve, or is it something more permanent that needs more radical changes? So if we look at the last, actually just 10 to 15 years, because these changes happened, or the radical changes happened in a very short period of time, what have dramatically changed is the way how we consume news and information. I brought a snapshot from the Reuters Institute Digital News Report, where the researchers asked internationally in many countries how people consume news, how they get their news. And with news, they mean political and socially relevant news, not just any news. And then in Europe, we see that actually news from online sources are now the new normal for almost everybody. Especially in Eastern Europe, in Northern Europe, in actually 80 to 90% people getting news from online sources is what is normal for most countries in Europe. There are some exceptions like Germany and France with a little bit more conservative news consumption routines, but nevertheless also their online sources are very important. And these online news are getting to us through the intermediaries of social networks and platforms. And if we look, it's again some data from this Reuters Institute Digital News Report. If we look at what are the infrastructures that we use to get into contact with this political news, we see that they are mostly social networks like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I display here only the 6 most relevant globally. In the study, there are listed a few more, also Viber, which is interesting if you look in Bulgaria and the use in Greece. But I just show you the first 6 of them. And when we look at the use for news, not the general news, just the informative use of these platforms, we see that Facebook and YouTube are kind of the global infrastructure for the delivery of news and social information to us as consumers in actually almost all the countries that were studied. Turkey being here, I think it's Turkey, a very strange, showing a very strange pattern of its own. And that's the second thing that I want you to see in this very colorful and bright picture. It is that we have very large differences among the countries. So if we study the news consumption, we should always think about which country, which platforms, because there are many differences. I've been working for the past 2 years very extensively on the situation in Germany, but what I know about how German publics use social media won't help me much understand the situation in other countries. So we have to be to look at the social and economic and market factors that are into play here. But what is nevertheless a general for all the countries in this study is that social media and media intermediaries have become a very important infrastructure for us. And this change has been debated very critically into the public with under the label of online harms, risks that these developments, this use pose to us as individuals and society. And I want to speak a little bit about this term of online harms, because online harms are very often associated precisely with the role of algorithms and algorithmic systems on online platforms. You've all heard of filter bubbles. You've all heard of the dissemination of disinformation and conspiracy theory. And I'm sure that you all have experienced violent and abusive contact and hate speech online. These are online harms or risks that have been we've been speaking about during the recent years. What I would choose to ignore on this side are the more individual risks, such as economic spam and fraud or infringement of copyrights, and focus more on this new risks and new phenomenon that we observe on online spaces. That's portrayed as the biggest threat to our democracies and societies nowadays. So on the one side, we have very predominant online platforms that are supposed to be risky for us as users at the one side. And on the other side, what we see in the research during the past 1 or 2 years is that people are not very well equipped, not very able to deal with these new digital infrastructures. Many users simply lack the digital literacy, and also because of that, the digital news literacy, to be able to distinguish between sources, to know who is behind the information that they're actually seeing at the moment, and to put it into a context so they can deal with what is coming into their news feed in an autonomous way. So this poses a challenge to us as a society, and from my perspective also to regulators. But what is the role of algorithms in this dystopian picture of online harms? Algorithms are basically everywhere. If we look into these digital infrastructures, they serve multiple purposes, but one of the most visible or important one is that they are filtering, sorting, and delivering all of the information that we see in our news feeds, but also in the search results or in the recommendations of videos and other content online. So they have become a very basic part of this infrastructure. You've all heard of filter bubbles and echo chambers. I'm not going to discuss the two terms here, the differences between them, but just kind of put them as one, and just remind you of the basic idea is that since algorithms are filtering all of the content that we hear, read, or watch online, we only become to see a part of the world, and this is a part that is very consistent with what we believe and what we want to believe and what we find interesting. So the idea behind filter bubbles is that in the end, through this algorithmic filtering and through my own need to see things that I actually like and want to see, we as consumers close ourselves in bubbles. So in the end, it's about lacking diversity of information, of sources, and of opinions that we perhaps should see, because the society, there are also other peoples with with different opinions and different interests living next door to us, and if we want to work as a society, we might need to take into consideration also their points of view. The filter bubble hypothesis says that we are not able to do that anymore. There is, of course, something very human helping us get into this nice and cozy comfort zone, is that we actually don't like so-called cognitive dissonance. So we actually want to avoid things that contradict what we believe and what we think is right, which is part of the normal way our brains function. And this, the idea behind filter bubbles is that these digital infrastructures are making it too easy for us to stay in our cognitive comfort zone. This is the theory. It has been out there in the world for a little bit more than 10 years now, and it has provoked much research on the subject. And if we look at the social science research on the existence of filter bubbles, the results are not so clear. Because many communication scientists would say there are actually no filter bubbles at all, or at least they cannot find them. And if you go into the specifics of the research, the picture gets a little bit more complicated. So it's about the question of, do these online platforms provide us with more or with less diversity of information and opinions? There are studies showing that actually users that use regularly Facebook and Twitter and Google search get contact with more news and with more varied news outlets. It was a recent study with tracking data of German users that I'm citing here. There are also studies showing that for other platforms, such as YouTube and TikTok, recommendations might not be as diverse. For example, last year we conducted a study on YouTube's recommendations, and we found that the recommendations next to a video very often contain videos from the same channel or for very similar channels. So these same channel recommendations are actually putting you into a kind of a recommendation bubble where you get more of the same and not a very diverse diet, at least in the recommendations. Also, there are other studies that show that behind YouTube's algorithmic sorting system, there is a very homogeneous networks of channels and videos with similar content, which might play a role in this outcome, that we don't have very diverse recommendations on YouTube. And these homogeneous channels are sorted according to their to the main topics that they are dealing. And there was a very recent experiment with the TikTok feeds of the Wall Street Journal, where they made artificial profiles and let them use certain videos, and then we could show that the algorithm was actually narrowing the variety, in the end showing content from one or two categories or only on very few topics. And the videos get increasingly more extreme the longer one was staying on TikTok. So that's what the research is telling us. For the mainstream of us browsing on classical social networks and on the search engines, we actually get even more diversity, and we cannot observe filter bubbles. For certain other problems, such as YouTube and TikTok, the picture might, however, look quite differently. And what I suspect is that this conflicting research is connected with what kind of data the algorithmic systems are actually using to display us the content, and what is the input and how they are designed to weight certain parts of the input over others. So if we think of what these systems that display the information can use as a data, we of course think about our profiles, where we put our locations, birthdays, the city where we come from. But actually there is a lot more of information that we're providing to the systems on an hourly basis, on every minute while we use them. And this is behavior, the data from our behavior. These are, here I put the studies that I cited. Yes, algorithmic input. So when I interact with some content, I'm creating data, but it's not only just my reactions and my behavior, it's also the behavior of my network. and also the behavior of people that have been classified as similar to me based on older information. So that is the input that these systems are actually taking into consideration. And what they are trying to achieve, that is the end of the arrow, is of grabbing our attention and making us stay longer and watch and read and hear more of the content, because they want, and we all know that, they want to sell us publicity. They want to sell us advertising. In order to achieve that goal, they want to select content that we like, or that they think that might like. That means that if they don't know what I like, they'll show me something that my friends like, or that that the system thinks that people like me might like, or they'll simply decide to show me content that is similar to the content that I'm already watching. And I think that's when we look back into the previous contradiction of less diversity or more diversity. That might be the cue to the riddle, because if I'm on a prototypical social network like Facebook, it has a lot of input on density of networks with other persons, with other people, and it can use this information to show me what other people are interacting with. So it's actually not guided by the content itself, but what the reactions of the other people and their interest. And as we know, people seldom have only one interest. We have many interests, and we react to a multiple of posts and content. So if an algorithm is trying to show me what my friends like, it will end with showing me a diversity of posts. A video sharing platform like YouTube, on the other side, don't have this input of dense interconnected individuals as a network, but has a lot of information of how similar the videos and the channels are to each other. So it can very easily recommend me content similar to what I like, thus leading to a very homogeneous world of recommendations. That is what I think is the explanation for the research results. What both kinds of algorithmic selection routines lead to is that if they want to grab my attention, if they want to keep me amused and interested in the content, they'll probably lead to, or they will end with showing me more engaging content. More engaging content means content that I'm going to react more, click more, comment more, and have more emotions towards. And unfortunately, as we have been seeing for years, this is mostly content that it's not so nice, that is often clickbait, that is sensational, and often very hateful and violent. So the problems that we observed, or that are discussed, the filter bubbles and the not so the content that is not so desirable from a normative perspective, are both in a way linked to algorithms with the second problems, the undesired content being probably the biggest problem. The diversity problem might be something that only applies to certain platforms and not to others, or not in such a big fashion. One small extension here. This is these are results that are that might apply to the mainstream, to the biggest part of the population. They probably are not true if we look at some fringe niche audiences with special interest. So if a group of people decide to use only a very narrow content with narrow topics and with narrow opinions, the algorithms are probably going to help them get what they want. And if they don't make an effort, or already have a very, very enclosed circle and a network in which they communicate and get the information from, you may actually end with a filter bubble. So what we can do, and that is the last part of my input, what can we do against this? algorithm-associated online harms. Actually, the platforms have been put into a lot of pressure from politicians and from society. So, and also because it's in their best economic interest, they have been trying to find solution to this problem, especially to the problem of violent and hateful content, because of course violent and hateful content are not good environments for putting your advertising in. What the big online platforms have been doing is they have been writing community guidelines, they have been content moderating, so they're filtering, they're reducing and removing some of the content, mostly by algorithms, but also with the support of human moderators. They have been cooperating with fact checkers who can perhaps filter a small part of the fake news that have been distributed on the platforms and label it. So they have been doing at least their publicity side of trying to make us believe that they can keep their platforms clean. There were the 4 R's of responsibility that I hear in every workshop made by Facebook, of the reduce, remove, reward, and I like the 4 R. So they're doing a very good job at convincing us that they can manage the problem on their own. The problem that we see here is, and this is a term that actually Facebook CEO invented, they have a problem with borderline content that is not beyond the threshold of their community guidelines, and there is no reason to actually remove or reduce the visibility of such a content, but is very close to it. Imagine a conspiracy theorist who is just giving his personal opinions without delving into a really crazy style of conspiracy theory. So he or she is maneuvering just on the border, but never trespassing it. Community guidelines and content moderation won't help you very much with this kind of content. There might be a need for more social interventions here. What kind of other instruments we have in hand or are being presently discussed and tried out to solve these problems? The other obvious weapons are the legal ones. Law, there have been a lot of experiments, or there have been a lot of legal creativity on this part to find fitting solutions to these very new problems. The one that you've probably heard of is the GDPR, that restricts the use of personal data. That might be useful if we consider the question, what is personal data? And personal data would be obviously be my name and birth date and the city I'm born into. But what about we consider also all the traces and interactions that I leave on these online platforms as personal data? So my reactions to the content can also be considered as a personal data. Then we should, under the GDPR, also discuss how the use and the gathering and the collecting and the working with this data is actually happening, and if it should be regulated in a more stricter way. There is another style of trying to fight online harms, and these are kind of enforcement regulations. The German Network Enforcement Act being the most obvious example. The French Loi Avia had been called unconstitutional by the French Constitutional Court, so we just stick with the German Network Enforcement Act. And this is a way to say, dear online platforms, please remove all the illegal content that is on your platforms within a reasonable, sometimes 24 hours frame of time. We have here the problem, who decides what is illegal? In the case of the German Network Enforcement Act, illegal is actually harassment, incitement of hate against some ethnic group, or personal attacking someone personally in an inappropriate way. So it's a very narrow understanding of illegal, which is beneath of the community guidelines that most online platforms have put for themselves. Another idea to regulate media intermediaries is in the new German Interstate Media Treaty, and it actually addresses the working of algorithms. And this is a very new legal approach that hasn't been tried yet, and it's been just in the beginnings. So we actually still don't know how effective this approach is going to be. The one principle of this approach is transparency. There is an obligation for big platforms, which have more than 2 million users in Germany, to make transparent the criteria of gathering, sorting, filtering, and display of information in the news feed. So the platforms have to explain us as users how their algorithm works. Which might be a step forward of looking into these black boxes where the enterprises are, of course, not telling us exactly how the algorithm works and are not allowing us to gather data to understand it better. The second principle, but that's not so important in this context, is the principle of non-discrimination. That means that all different producers should be treated equally or non-discriminatory by the automated decision systems behind the news feeds. Now the European Digital Service Act is actually a very new thing. It's still in discussions. We don't exactly know what we're going to have in the end out of it, because it's being redrafted at present, and it takes some years until it is there and we can see if it works. But in the debates and in the drafts, we can see that it is actually taking some cues from the German way, the transparency principle, the removal of illegal content within certain timeframes from the Network Enforcement Act. And there is a new idea that I find yes, I see I'm out of time.
To interrupt, it's very interesting. I just wanted to ask, do you have more slides? Can we summarize it? Oh, okay. So
this is, I'm actually within 2 sentences, and I'm, please excuse me for overstepping my time. So the one thing I really think would be interesting if the Digital Services Act managed to do is to introduce the data sharing obligations with regulators and with researchers, because then we might actually have the means to understand how these algorithmic systems works with what we do not know at present. And lastly, just to be complete, there are other approaches that are being discussed of how to help us as society out of this not very bright world of new online intermediaries. The one is make better platforms, public service infrastructure. It's been tried, it hadn't succeeded yet. Perhaps it might succeed if you put more money inside. I don't know, I'm a bit skeptical. We can try to force the platforms make some changes in their design and nudge us into using them in a more responsible way. This is also very novel and hasn't been tried yet. It might be interesting. The thing is how to make the platforms do that. And the last thing, and we've been doing it at societies and regulators all the time, promote media and news literacy, educate people to deal better with these new infrastructures. And I'll say it won't be enough, but we can do more of this and not less of this, and it will perhaps help a little bit. Thank you for your attention, and yes, that was from me.
Thank you, Gergana. Thank you very much. It was very interesting talk. I find it very explicit in terms of how the algorithmic systems are implemented in the media and how we can try to regulate them. So I hope there will be more questions to raise these issues again during the Q&A session. Just to remind you that you can ask your questions in the chat. And after the 3 expert talks, we will go and raise them to the speaker. So next in line is Manolis Dirotakis. Shortly to introduce him as well. He is a journalist and author. Over the last 15 years, his research has focused mainly on techno-social issues. He has constantly investigated the role of the internet, social media platforms, and artificial intelligence products on humanity. He has published several books, produced a number of documentaries, and he is a contributing author of Katimerini newspaper, who is one of the Greece leading publications. So I'm pleased to give the floor to Manolis and to listen his presentation.
Hello from Athens. Thank you, Galina. Thank you, Gergana, for your nice presentation. I'm Manolis. Let me share my screen, please. And oops, sorry. Is it okay? Oh. Great. So yes, I'm a journalist and author of several books in Greek. It will be all Greek to you. And for at least 20 years, I am researching technology and media. I'll try to be brief. My presentation has this title, The Age of Inattention, Media, Democracy, and AI. Some of the things that you will see, you have already listened to Gergana, so you are very familiar to them. So I'll get to the point straightforward. My main focus is social media, as Gergana's presentation too, especially Facebook. As you saw in Greece, Facebook is huge. I see social media, and I'll try to make an interpretation of those you listened to before. Social media is a kind of AI-powered disinformation machine. They are extremely powerful tools because of what Gergana describes. They are not tools for dialogue. They are persuasive technologies. Several researchers have concluded to that, and our experience too. They are best for their best use is for deliberation, a call to action. Emotional stuff, let's say. What we call algorithmic news feeds is, in my opinion, what Norbert Wiener has described as cybernetics. It's control and communication technology, maybe control and command tools. I see them in a perspective of manipulation. I think that they are a kind of automated manipulation due to their business model. So echo chambers and filter bubbles and the phenomenon of homophily, of being surrounded only by the people that you agree with, are aspects of this kind of business model of automated manipulation. The next step, of course, is what we all know: deepfakes. They call them synthetic media. They are basically it's the AI, machine learning, deep learning in the use of manipulation. We could say that they are fully automated mechanisms of trust erosion. Please keep this issue of trust erosion, because you will need it then. This is a barometer, very recent, about the frequency of the problem of fake news. How often do you come across news or information that you believe misrepresent the reality or is even false? We can see that in the EU of 28, the majority of people every day or at least once a week, they face fake news in all countries except maybe in Finland. The citizens do acknowledge, do report and document the issue of fake news. And they consider it a real problem, and it is a real problem. Experience and data show that it is a real problem. In your opinion, is the existence of news or information that misrepresent the reality or is even false a problem? Yes, it is a problem. For the majority also says that it is a big problem. And it is a big problem for democracy. That's where the problem of trust erosion comes. It's a problem for our institutions, for our democracy. This is a very fertile ground for autocrats, for authoritarians, for anyone who would like to get advantage of this situation of no one trusting no one and coming with his, let's say, platforms. We can see what China tries to do with the social credit system and the AI use of those powerful tools in the use of digital tyrannies. So it is a real problem for democracy, but there is an counterintuitive argument here we have to consider. Mr. Hugo Mercier, a French neuroscientist, has written this rather interesting book, Not Born Yesterday. He says that we're not that gullible. We are rationally skeptical, and only messages that resonate with our prior beliefs are accepted. We are not so, victims. We're not so victimized by those platforms and from those media. He says that even mass persuasion, propaganda, Nazi propaganda was not that effective as has been described, and this is the stereotype. He says that when people believe in actual conspiracies, actually they don't talk, they shut up. So we have to keep in mind that maybe their power, the power of big tech and the power of social media and Facebook in particular is not so big, but this argument has its flaws, because I will explain you why, in my opinion. Here we can see the research has been done from a professor in MIT, David Rand is his name, for New York Times. And here we can see that the New York Times subscribers rate correctly the true news. On the right side, the three columns on the right side are news, actual news, true, which are true, and they are rated by the New York Times subscribers correctly. On the left side, the three columns are fake news, as a COVID-19 vaccine will genetically modify humans, for example. And so New York Times seem to be very thoughtful about their news consumption. And we journalists in general say that, okay, this subscription model is a kind of a hope for journalism and for the media. At the same time, the yellow columns indicate that New York Times subscribers are equally sharing fake and true news. There's no big difference. But when we go to the national sample here, we can see that the fake news are being equally shared with the news of the true news. And that is a big problem. Fake news tend to be equally shared with true news. There are many explanations And at this specific research, I would like you to watch the left side, because on the right side is the those who have rated accurately the true news. On the left side, it's the false headlines, the fake news. And we see at the yellow column the three possible reasons of people sharing those fake news. The one portion, the little portion, is the guys who said, I did it on purpose. I wanted to, to beat my opponent's party. I wanted to do harm to someone, anything. It was on purpose. The other third is confusion, which is I didn't know. I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand if it was true or false, this information. And the other third, which is, in my opinion, the most interesting, is inattention. The people said that I wasn't paying attention. And that's why I gave to my presentation this title, "The Age of Inattention." I call this a big problem, and I want to show you this video. You may have read this excellent book of Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. Here it's an Instagrammer making her daily routine, exercise routine on Instagram and on YouTube live. And on the background, in the background, there is a military coup in Myanmar. So we may use those powerful tools, and we are constantly distracted. And on the background, all major issues are being, deployed and happening, and we are making our daily exercise routines or anything. So we don't pay enough attention to what's being going on, because those powerful tools tend to distract us. So in my opinion, we must address the issue of distraction, of inattention. Those machines are very good at taking our focus away from what we should. We are all vulnerable. Even if we had the technical ability, because we don't have it, and self-regulation from the part of those corporations does not work. If we had this ability to validate and understand better our news consumption, the mere structure of our AI-powered media sphere, which takes advantage of our vulnerabilities, makes the endeavor Sisyphean. This is the pessimistic, let's say, view. I think that we can do some things, as Gergana has described, transparency for sure, openness and participation. This monopolistic environment does not help, obviously. We need policies and regulation. Apart from the examples that Gergana gave us, I want to point out the new proposal of the EU law for AI. The risk-based approach is very interesting. They speak about, let's say, huge risks. They want to ban some implementations, dangerous implementations, like social scoring, we are seeing in China or else. Some technical solutions, yes, of course, why not? Even if deploying more AI to solve problems that are being made from AI is rather oxymoron. Of course, educated citizens and data literacy, values, ethical codes and consensus. Of course, I was speaking to members of Greek parties, and I insisted on making a council and agree on a consensus of not using deep fakes or not using, let's say, VR or some technologies that cannot that are not ethical. Institutional solutions. We have to agree that all this issue is a political issue and not a technical one. Facebook needs today thousands of human moderators. AI and machine learning systems are not enough. And I want to remind that Facebook's AI thought that a shooter in Christian church was a video game player. Every system can be played. Every system can be played. Every system can be a black box, every system. So we do need investigative journalism and data journalism and new narratives and interpretations. Educational solutions for sure, from the beginning, cultivating critical thinking and digital literacy. But above all, in my opinion, we need to see the bigger picture, to have coherent vision for our technological future. Today it's more urgent than any other time in history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manolis. Thank you so much for this very interesting, absolutely brilliant presentation. I think it also raises very important issues of nowadays media making and distribution, especially this focus that you put on the corona pandemic situation, or post-corona, whatever how we call it, but how these fake news, deep fakes, etc., really affect this, as you call it, trust erosion. But yeah, I also like how you also ended up with the possible solutions. So I hope you have time to talk more and discuss more about this. But I will briefly go to the third presenter today, Vladimir Petkov, who is a Chief Technology Officer in Data Pro company since 2011. He works with digital media and business development. And he gained this experience also in Economedia, which is Bulgaria's top news publisher. So under his leadership, the company has transformed into a fully integrated human technology ecosystem, both in terms of service lineup and infrastructure. Vladimir also serves as CEO of another company, which is like a research and development hub of Data Pro, and it's called Identrix. So I hope he will tell us more about their activities as well. And nonetheless, he is also a vocal advocate for digitalization and adaptation of new technologies by businesses in Bulgaria. He leads this podcast I mentioned and many other activities he runs. So I am very pleased to give the floor to Vlado.
Thank you, Galia. Could you please confirm that you can hear me? Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, I presume that you can. Okay, I'm going to share my screen right now. Just a second. And yeah, so I presume that, yeah, could you please by voice confirm that you can see my presentation?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'll call myself a practitioner, and I'm trying to be a businessman. And all of the technologies I'm going to talk about, these are businesses right now. And we use all of these to help, in this case, publishers to be more productive or to deliver new products in order to survive. And when I say publishers, I mean traditional publishers. These are companies with news outlets, and they have journalists, and these journalists, they create reports or news articles. So the technologies in this case, they help these people to do their job. So that's the goal. And you know that the media business is in almost constant innovation for the past at least 20 years. So print is dying, all the traditional formats are at least changing. So media companies are really trying to adapt and to keep the very high levels of objective and true journalism in a completely different world, which is really challenging because all these companies which were mentioned previously by Gergana, these are one of the bigger competitors and one of the bigger challengers into the media market. So how do we help media companies? Yeah, that's me. A few words about Identix. Identix is one of the biggest collectors of open data. This means that on a daily basis, we collect about 1,300,000 articles. These articles are in more than 200 languages, different languages. And what we do with this, we try to automate some sort of knowledge extraction. We call knowledge extraction anything you do with people or with a machine, which is based on these huge data sets. So imagine you monitor all the articles, let's say in Greece, and you want to know the major topics which are important for the publishers. What is the sentiment of a certain author or a certain publisher toward a certain topic or a politician, etc. So all of this, actually, this is not a new stuff, but these are technologies which are most of the time created by companies like Google or Facebook, but because they open source them, companies like mine have access to these technologies, and we modify them in order to use them to help publishers. So yeah, we monitor millions of documents per day. We automate knowledge extraction from all these data, and we design something which we call semantic networks or knowledge bases, but I'm not going to dive deeper into this. How journalists are using these technologies. The most interesting thing for journalists is the so-called automated journalism. This is literally trying to produce news articles or news reports with machines in order to help journalists. So first of all, don't worry, nobody is asking this to be a fully autonomous process, but they want to save or to remove the dirty work or the low value chain work, and they want to focus the journalists on really human tasks which cannot be done by machines. But yeah, automated journalism is a very big topic in the media world. Another thing is transforming databases into knowledge bases, or using the archive of the media and literally recognizing all the different entities which were mentioned previously and creating this huge how to call them, knowledge bases around a certain entity or a company, which is a really radical change of the way media works, and literally transforming all the articles into knowledge and reusing that knowledge in order to have a way more objective journalism, or to discover hidden facts or knowledge. How else it could be used? First of all, fake news detection and generation, and media companies are usually a target, and I'm going to speak later more about this, because there are a lot of media companies which allow comments under their articles, and these comment sections are usually targeted target for the so-called trolls. I really don't like this term because that's something else, but yeah, people call these trolls. So attacks by trolls, bots, etc., or generally parties which use the media like viruses to spread misinformation on their own. And this misinformation looks really kind of written by people, but it's in many cases it's not written by people, but by language models and computers. Another thing, AI is transforming media, all the recommendations in the articles, all the different ways to monetize their audiences. Yeah, AI helps media to do that. And at the end, I'm going to say again, automatically generated summaries or automatically generated reports, that's a huge thing right now. In media, the so-called natural language generation, the way you use machines to create articles. So that's really big thing right now. And I say NLG, the things we do with NLG, of course, this is news. These are company reports. This is a report of what happened with the company based on the news coverage for that company, or industry reports, which is a way bigger, what's going on with certain industries. Or let's say telecom industry in Serbia. So what's going on there. Yeah, you can do this with people, but you can do that with a machine, or product descriptions, and again, summaries. By the way, the summaries and the natural language generation, that's the most complicated part. And at the same time, it is very challenging because, as I will talk later, there are a lot of, so how to call them, serious problems and biases. And yeah, a lot of stuff is going on here. So all of this sounds good, but yeah, really briefly, why companies are doing this. They want to automate, but machines are naturally unintelligent, which means that 100% accuracy is not, it's impossible right now. Right now, the journalists, like the editorial teams, for the past 20 years, they're underfunded. The number of the journalists usually in the editorial rooms, they decrease, and at the same time, the complexity they are faced increases, and the amount of data they need to process in order to do what they do increases. So, and even if you have enough people, the information, the data sources which they need to cover is that those data sources are that many, and the data is that much that people cannot process this. That's why we need machines to help the people. And the solution, the solution for that problem, we call it human-in-the-loop machine learning, which generally looks like this. You train machine learning models. The machine learning models are trained by constantly monitoring what people do in content management systems or in other softwares, and they train a custom model to solve a particular problem. And after that, we might or might not allow the machine to start doing predictions. And the prediction has an certainty score. So let's say that if a machine says that an article is, let's say, a positive, or it's regarding a certain topic, and it's like a 95% sure, we might allow the machine to make an autonomous decision that, okay, that's true or not, or we can just stop it and oversee everything the machine does and consider it not true. Of course, we can put people here, and if the machine is not very certain about its prediction, we can involve person to correct or reinforce the knowledge. And all of this we store in something called semantic repository. That's a knowledge base which keeps track of all this interaction and helps us to retrain the machine in order to improve the output. With this strategy, hopefully, most companies increase their productivity without increasing the number of people involved. A few words about automated abstracting, and just to visualize that this is an article, and imagine that you are a person who needs to summarize this. So you literally need to read this, understand it, and produce something like that. This is the original document. This is an output of the machine. We invested heavily in Identics for the last 2 years to create a pipeline with a lot of custom models. etc., in order to be able to transform articles like this into documents like that. There are a lot of applications where how this saves journalistic time, like snippets or newsletters, or even allowing the journalists to read only the abstracts here, not the original documents where they monitor press agencies, etc. Because I told you, journalists now, the current journalists, they need to read ever increasing amount of documents in order to produce an article. So this technology saves them a lot of work and repeatable tasks. Of course, when you do this, after solving all the technical issues, which are a lot, I can guarantee that, the first thing is to find all the ethical issues which are connected with this technology. And I'm going to talk more about this, and I will present you with several problems which are involved with that method. I really think that this technology is good, but it needs to be constantly monitored and supervised by people. Otherwise, the defects I'm going to present later will be shown to people or to end consumers, etc. And this will be a huge problem because companies media could become racist or sexist, or to reinforce certain biases towards certain minorities or certain groups or even certain countries. So this needs to be monitored. So how do we monitor the output of the machine? We have our own fact consistency algorithm, which we worked really hard to do. We have spell checking algorithms. We check the textual contradiction of the corresponding sentences from the original document and the document we created, and we have the so-called nonsense checking algorithm. Very high overview of such a technology and how it works. First of all, we have the original document. That could be an article in all these 200 languages. And the first task is to translate that into English, because currently we work with English language. When we rewrite something, we rewrite it into English language. But yeah, we translate it into English, which on its own is a huge and very complicated problem to do. We are clearing the text. That's the first step, and then we train a model, and after that we utilize a model to rewrite the article. We use the so-called big language models, which for the people who are involved into natural language processing, I'm sure that you know these things, like, or you've heard, like, for things like GPT-3, GPT-2, or BART, these models. We use this type of models, or their algorithms, to train custom versions with a different training data in order to deliver this. But the important part is here. At the end, we have automatic evaluation, which are more than 10 different checks of the output. For the people who are involved into this, these are things which compare again certain phrases or certain words, or the so-called engrams from the original document and the output, and we do something like a similarity score in order to see are the original document and the end document, are they very similar, or there are a lot of discrepancies. We use human evaluation, of course, to monitor this, because I told you, this is not a perfect system, and we need to involve people everywhere, especially when we do recommendations, or when we allow the machines to write something for us. Otherwise, problems can happen. And this is, again, an explanation of the previous slide. With this technology, we achieved 40% productivity gain for a media intelligence company, which is a lot. All this money could be reused for, I don't know, making a podcast or doing something else, which people are way better, or creating a way deeper analytical content. And companies don't need to spend their thin resources on writing summaries, because they can do something way better in the value chain, and this can help them actually. Another big topic in our industry is hate speech detection. This is generally right now the way we're doing this. This is a classifier. So this is the type of model we use. Of course, and we detect hate speech not in media content, but in comments under articles, because this is right now in Bulgaria, this is a very modern way to bully media, because big media, they are, as I mentioned, they allow people to write comments under articles, but at the same time, media are regulated. They need to monitor these comments, and there are parties which abuse this, and usually they explore the fact that media right now, they don't have enough moderators. We mentioned Facebook, that they use thousands of moderation, including people in Bulgaria, by the way. They really use thousands of moderators for all the different jurisdictions, etc. But traditional media, they don't have the resources to do that. So parties explore this in order to flood media with fake news or hate speech, and after that they report media to the local authorities in order the local authorities to sanction that media, and that's a way to silence this type of companies. So we created several models which help companies or bulletin boards to help them to very fast identify this type of models in order to be safe and to allow people in a democratic way to share their opinion, because that's just part of the discourse which happens under the articles. This is not that important. This usually leads to 80% productivity gain. The problems, the huge problems which are happening right now, especially when machine learning, deep learning, and natural language generation is involved. First of all, there are a lot of racial, political, and sexual biases. There are a lot of hallucinations. You will see them later. I have examples of this. There are factual inconsistencies. There is a lot of hate speech and weirdness generated by the models, and we as practitioners need to monitor this. Otherwise, we will be in the position of Facebook, which were extremely optimistic about all of this, and they implemented it into their products. And right now, the whole world is talking that Facebook is killing democracy and changing societies or reinforcing biases. Usually this happens because the decision makers, they're really focused on productivity gains. They are really focused on metrics like engagements, etc. A lot of different KPIs on the product, from the product perspective, because they're businesses and they really monitor all of this, and they think about ethical problems later. So they prefer to be fast, they prefer to be innovative, and they think after that. And I really think that that's the first thing we need to change into the way we do business. I think that ethics should be first and automation should be later. And we need to, by design, think about all of these problems and how we will solve them before offering our product. First thing, this is GPT-3, one of the most modern models right now, and it was asked by researchers to write an essay named What Else Ethiopia. And if you read this text, the model says that literally Ethiopia should be destroyed and people there should be killed, and it's unsavable. So this is really, at least it's inhumane, it's brutal. So yeah, that's one problem with GPT-3. Another problem with language models, this is from our practice. I told you that we rewrite documents. We use the original article and we rewrite document. And here you can see some deficiencies. The first deficiency I'm going to demonstrate are the hallucinations. How to understand this thing here. In the article and the blue, this is the source and the summary, and the red is the output of the machine, and the red is the mistake. So in the first, in the first example, you see that here is mentioned that something happened on Sunday and more than a dozen people were killed, but the output of the machine is more than 20 people. So the machine hallucinated these 20 people because it doesn't know for certain, but yeah, that happens. And here is Sunday, but here is Saturday. And here is killing at least 11 people and injuring at least 20 others. And here it just says that there are more victims. So this is a hallucinating models just coming up with facts because that's a defect of how these models are created. And later we can go deeper of how they are created and how to avoid things like that. But another example is that something happened and these three sources said something, and here they are not three sources, they are three whistleblowers, which is kind of a positive. It's not the same, but in a way it's like an improvisation. So the model improvises here, so it could be considered, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but yeah. And at the same time, the model again hallucinates these 5,000 pounds into this 100,000 pounds. So there are a lot of stuff like this when you use natural language generation. All of this could be fake news if you allow the machine to create this output and publish it directly. So we should be really careful and catch all of this and not allow machines to write articles that way or to do not supervise them. Factual inconsistencies. Here in this document, it says that Brady Olson, a teacher in North Thurston High, took down a gunman on Monday. And in the output of the machine, when retold the story, from the hero Brady Olson right now, he actually opened fire. So he became the villain, which is, again, it's completely opposite. So that's fake news too. So this is a huge problem again. And the weird thing, like this one, so if you send the machine just asterisks and ask the machine to create text, you can see that after the asterisk, this is the output of the machine. So it becomes really evil, which is really, really bad. So we should be very careful of what output should be sent to the models. The idea that the machines have this general intelligence and they think the way we think, that's the false promise right now by many AI practitioners, or the overpromise of the AI businesses, which by the way, the term artificial intelligence really reinforces this expectation by consumers that because it's in AI, that's the similar, it's like people, but artificial. It's not like that. It's a way narrower. It's like a parrot. It's a very productive parrot and pretty much does not understand and does not think the way we think with our terms and understanding. So it's a completely different model. So it's literally a very productive parrot, and we need to be aware of that. And we should create strategies which utilize the strong sides of the very productive parrots, not to allow them to talk to people that way, because if they do, they could be very evil. I'm not going to talk that much about the environmental cost. You can read more about that, but that's a huge problem right now because training the language models is extremely expensive. There are a lot of papers regarding that. I would really recommend the paper by Timnit Jibril. She used to work for Google and she was fired because of that paper. I'm sure that some of you are aware of that case, but I believe that you, if you're not aware, you need to read the paper. The paper is it's in extremely human readable format, and it talks about the problems of the language models plus the environment footprint of all these technologies. So how do we fight all of that? From our perspective, the best fight is the training data. So when we train the machine, I told you that it's a parrot, and it's a very smart parrot, but it's a parrot. So pretty much we need to moderate what kind of training data we should send to the machine. If we send racial data or sexist data, that the model will become sexist or racist. And that's why we need to have people. And by the way, that should be a huge business of creating training data, particularly for machine learning and deep learning, because without this, and again, I'm going to talk about Facebook and Google. They don't do it like that. They usually try to use as training data the behavior or the output of their users into their platforms, because they want to save on that. And this is how they do most of their services. They really rely on the output of their consumers. And the problem is that their consumers use hate speech. They use some of them are sexist. They have a lot of deviations. And after that, if you have this approach and if you save on training data, you literally transform all of this into the machines, and you make them bad. So all of this needs to be avoided, really. And after that, yeah, you can work on algorithmic level to try to isolate events or behavior which is not desirable or bad behavior, the behavior which I talked about previously. But that's for me. With this approach, so if you cannot modify the training data and all of the things you can do after that, they're kind of limited. So you will be tight yeah, you cannot solve the problem. After that, the best way is to involve some sort of human in the loop machine learning. So involve people constantly to monitor the output of the machine. Don't create models and just put these models into production and allow them to do whatever they want to do. Don't be that optimistic, I would like to say. In our company, we have a paper regarding that topic. On that link, you can go and you can just read this. We created a paper for natural language generation and all the biases we met and how we solved them. So you can read that paper on that address. And I want to give credit to the team behind all of this. These are Eva Marinova, who is our chief data scientist, and she will join us later. She will be here, so she will be able to talk deeper in all of this. I would like to thank Christian Kristev, who is one of our researchers, and Yulina Petrova, another of our researchers and data scientists. They are really the people behind all of this, and they're very smart and talented and young people, and I'm really proud of them. So yeah, that's from me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Vlado. Thank you so much bringing here this point of view by the industry side towards the topic we discussed today. It was very useful, at least for me, to see how this algorithmic system works, how they are developed, moderated, what problems bring, and how we can probably, hopefully, sort this out. Right, so it's time for discussion. I see already in the chat there are lots of questions, so we start with them. And the first one was by Katarina. Katarina, do you want to ask the question by yourself, or it should be me to write it?
Okay, I can ask the question. I'm unable to start video. I don't know, something's wrong with technicals. No worries. So my question is for Gergana Biva, and I would like to ask, how do you measure diversity on these platforms? What are the criteria? And maybe extend the question to what do you mean when talking about diversity?
Well, diversity is a very broad term, but basically, when you try to measure it, you have to break it down into something that you can quickly and cheaply measure. As Vlado just said, training a language algorithm to gather data is a very costly thing. And normally we have, especially in this kind of public funded research, we are dealing with very few resources. So what we do, the last project actually, we used human classifiers. So we put people in front of the data to classify it. the most simple thing is simply to distinguish the entities, the authors or the sources of certain information, and see if they're the same or different. And the more different they are, and then you can attach them to categories like classical media, normal users, influencers like YouTubers or Instagram influencers, parties and business, etc., etc. So kind of to get the data on the sources of the information and classify them to some categories that are obvious and easily classifiable. Then if you have a little bit of more of resources, you can kind of dig deeper and see into the content that they're actually sharing, and you can look into the topic of what is being done, but it gets more resource intensive. And if you have really a lot of time and resources, you can also try to check if the opinions that are conveyed are different or more diverse. So diversity is a big theoretical concept that can be broken into different indicators. The idea is that, and that's what I put into this slide with the filter bubble Wikipedia graphic, and the diversity of sources, information, and opinions, which are typical indicators that are used to measure diversity. The idea is that me as a citizen need to know firstly different political opinions, and then mostly all the facts in the context from the different interest group. And that's why the actor approach is a nice way to get into the diversity, or to tap into the diversity dimension with less effort. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, thank you. And another very small question: when we talk about diversity, do you mean, are you focusing in the Western countries? I guess so. What is the geographical, extent that you are doing your research and measuring diversity? Do you include, for example, African countries or other countries?
Well, what we are studying, or what the studies that I normally conduct, are on the German public, because we are German media regulator and we are interested in how the German citizens are informed on an everyday basis. You can, of course, this would be another dimension of diversity on the topic level, not on the actor level, to see if people get news and information from difficult regional loci in the media. But that would also not only be a problem of the algorithms and of the platforms making this content available to you, but also of the actors who produce this information. We know from the classical media research that diversity, geographical diversity, is not very typical for classical media. They prefer to inform you on the national news and on the next relevant power sources. Like when I did my study of Bulgarian newspapers, there were just Bulgarian national politics and some European institution involved. And that will be actually in every national media environment, you'll get a very few actors. But this is a different story, which is, we cannot be attributed to intermediaries or to algorithms.
Thank you.
I think the second question is also to me.
Yes, it's by Desi Fasenko. Desi, would you like to put your question? Or...
Yes, thanks very much. Thank you, Georgana, for the, I think, very fast summary of the role of social media in informing or misinforming societies. I think the way you've approached it gave a very good sense of its breadth and magnitude, and also the role of algorithms. But my question kind of, I think, touches a bit deeper on, isn't the question of misinformation more a matter of how we as readers and society more generally approaches media and media pluralism, and the role of media in informing oneself is? And this is the reason why I'm asking whether fighting misinformation is more a matter of enhancing the audience literacy, as you suggested, or more generally instilling more appreciation for media pluralism in societies, or it's a matter of instilling more ethical hygiene in the way platforms and internet intermediaries more generally operate, or it's a matter of how society and various actors in society hold platforms accountable for what they do. And the reason why I'm asking is, nowadays, regulations and regulators are often blamed for the effect platforms have on media pluralism and freedom of speech. And there is a huge tension between both freedom of speech and regulating media. But ultimately, regulations are a secondary phenomenon. They come into effect, and they can actually help only when the causes of the problem are clearly identified and recognized. So I was wondering, in your view, what are the causes for misinformation more generally?
I won't be an advocate for a very technologically focused answer here, because misinformation is a social problem that has existed before we have online and digital information.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there is misinformation. There are actors who have interest in spreading it, but they're what we observe is that they're very successful at spreading it through social media and through other online platforms. So since they're managing to do it, we had to think of solutions how to kind of cut this spread and make it less available, or put it into context. That's what this fact-checking labeling solution is. Because we want to safeguard the freedom of opinion expression and the freedom of media. So don't remove everything, but put it into context, provide it with contextual information. That can be a solution too. But I think it's always multi-weapon, multi-approach that will lead us where we want to go, and educating society and having some literacy problems is certainly a must-have, but it won't be enough. And what I'm skeptical about is expecting platforms to behave ethically. Because they're telling us that they're doing it, they're installing these huge guidelines and promising things. And as I said, I've been during the past 2 years in several workshops with Facebook and with Google, YouTube advocates, and now they're always promising very nice things. And while we were doing this study on YouTube, we get into contact with the representatives of YouTube for Germany, and we were discussing the results. And recently, when I was surfing again on YouTube, I saw bigger problems that we encountered in the study 1 year ago. So they're promising changes, but in the end, if they're against their business model, it won't work. So that's what I'm thinking about, conflicting, expecting ethics from someone who is actually acting in a very economically driven way. That we as society should define the rules and should formulate expectations is certainly necessary. And this is this other aspect that is also widely discussed. We cannot let the platforms define the rules and define what is appropriate and what is not, what kind of content is desirable and what is not. And when I was speaking about all of these law solutions, there is another aspect. We're speaking of these law solutions from a very ethnocentric perspective, and we're thinking about a normal democratic check and balancing system where we discuss these solutions and we as a society agree, and then they install them, and we have the courts to provide that everything is safely applied. But these are solutions that might not very work in a more authoritarian other kind of system where it can be. So censorship is the thing to be aware of, and to kind of to be a central avoiding point for regulation.
If I understand your answer correctly, so we end up with the stick rather than with the carrot, as an ultimate solution in this case. So would that be changing Section 230 of the Communications Act in the US, which would allow Facebook and YouTube being held liable as information services providers for all the content on their newsfeed, or you think it's something different?
I think we need actually a little bit of both, because we are past the point where only the carrot can help. It's my we have some monopole players that are making the rules, and they're making them only according to their interest, and they haven't proven to be very very willing to comply with social expectations, or very often doing just lip service and minor changes without coping with the bigger issues or the reasons why we have this phenomenon. What is liability problem is, I think this is a very technical discussion, discussing liability regimes for online platforms. But in the end, I don't think that in the European regulation frame we'll ever come to a point where online platforms are fully held liable for what people are posting on their platforms. So I think the stick will never be a very pointy one or a very dangerous one. It will be always in the style of we make a compromise and see where the platforms are willing to go, what we want them to do as a minimum, and make a compromise. Especially, I mean, we're speaking about European regulation. More, well, more dialogue is almost not possible.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you for the
question.
I
just wanted to ask Manolis and Vlado to also to feel free to share their comments or point of view towards this issue that we start discussing. And another note to everyone, I don't know if this is a technical problem with the camera that are not switched on. I think it was during the share screening we experienced this problem, but can you try again to switch on the camera? Because it's really weird to not see actually your faces now.
It doesn't work. The messages we are getting is that the host hasn't switched our camera. So I guess it's a matter of administrating the call.
Adi, can you try solve this problem, or it's not possible right now? Maybe we should restart this call, but if needs to be restarted.
It's saying host has stopped it.
Yeah, I got the same message a little bit before. Then Adi made me co-host, and then it sorted out. But I don't know if now it's possible to be done. Anyway, so we go on. Manolis and Vlado, do you want to add something to these issues, or we go to the next question?
No, to the next question. I have a remark for some things of Vlado said.
All right. Okay. So Desi, it's again you that you put a question to Vlado?
I'm sorry, I wouldn't like to usurp the call. So if somebody else would like to ask a question, I can wait.
Okay.
Otherwise,
then we jump to Fatih one. Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Fatih, do you want to ask the question?
Thank you. Technically speaking, which algorithms do you use usually to train the classifiers? I mean, do you have some specific and successful algorithms to classify text, for example, to detect hate speech? Thank you.
I see that Eva is here. Eva, could you please answer this question for me? Thank you.
Hello. So if we speak technically, we use classical algorithms to set the ground truth, and then we improve it with some more sophisticated neural approaches. So we are not sticking to one algorithm, but we try like an ensemble of algorithms. and at the end we use the best one. But for hate speech detection, neural models are better because they understand the context better of
Thank
words.
you.
And thank you.
If I don't know if you mentioned the exact models or the frameworks you use, that would be great, and I think that it will be helpful.
Yes, we use actually it's a PyTorch mostly that we use, and TensorFlow to build these models, and we use a lot of these modern language models. So we fine-tune them for the task. We find language-specific models to work with them, and that's the main idea. But transformers are the main how to say the production ready library to use for NLP and for these language models.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question is again to Vlado by Stefania. Stefania, do you wanna ask your question?
Yes, thank you for the very interesting presentations to all of you. So to Vlado specifically or his colleagues. So I imagine you have access to a lot of data, especially text in your line of work in the original language. You mentioned that you do translate usually the text and then work on the English version of it and then translate it back to the language if needed. Have you considered that the models built on top of the language on top of the language models trained on your data may output a higher accuracy or performance than the actually translated version of it?
Yeah. For most of the tasks we create models where we do not use English language. We do not involve translation because if we do this, we will recycle an existing model we already have, but the precision will be lower. That's why we prefer to create custom models for each different language, which is way more expensive. But the results are way better. And with that approach, because you create model with custom data for a custom problem, the output is way better. Plus we have control and we can we can try to solve all the ethical issues which I mentioned previously. That's, by the way, one of my major criticism of companies or researchers using these general models, which are provided by platforms like Google Cloud, because these are one model to fit them all. And they're there, they are very easy to use, they have APIs, etc. But they should, people are using them for all and for very different use cases. And at the best, they don't have the desired precision and recall most of the times, but they inherit all the defects, they inherit them. So for most of the problems, we don't do this. We use translation when we retell stories. Right now, that's a new service for us. And we are using translation in order to be able, because that's a specific business requirement. And the specific business requirement is that we need to read in local language and write into English. And in our current technology, we use this because we want to be compliant as many languages as possible. But depending on the business and how well things are going on that sphere, we will have enough resources to invest into custom models in order to, let's say, write directly in Bulgarian or German or Greek. We want to do that, but the cost it's significant. We are talking about tens of thousands of documents examples, and they need to be verified by people, and it's a huge cost. So for us, and right now we're sticking with translation into English. We by the way, we did a trial where we let's say for Bulgarian language, because we have a use case to do it in Bulgarian. We used Bulgarian language, we used a Bulgarian article, translated it into English, created a summary, and after that translated the summary back into Bulgarian. The customer didn't like it, and the feedback was that Bulgarian media content was not ready for this, because the translation models, they pretty much massacred names. And the other problem was the way, let's say, politicians speak here, which is, let's say, not the typical Bulgarian language. So a lot of information and knowledge is lost during the translation process. First from Bulgarian into English, and after that from English to Bulgarian. So that's why we abandoned this. And for that particular case, another approach, which is way more algorithmic, the so-called extracts. The extracts, there is no natural language generation there. We literally use algorithm to nominate the most interesting sentences from an article, and after that to just extract them and stick them together and call that on let's say on resume. This approach, the customer was happier with that, but that's pure algorithmic thing. It's way more controllable, but it has different issues. So yeah, working with training data in diverse training data for each particular language pretty much delivers a way better results. But for some use cases, like this very specific one, where you need at the end to read in the local language and produce into English, translation works.
Good. Okay. So Manolis, I will give you now the chance to put your comment or question, and maybe this will be the last one because we are exceeding the time as you see.
Okay, thank you very much, Galina. Vlado, I really liked your presentation. The product seems very interesting. I would test it for sure. I recently made an interview with a science fiction writer. He's a rather well-known, Ted Chiang. He said that AI is, the term, as you said, is rather misrepresenting reality, because we usually speak about applied statistics. So yes, AI makes more sexy the things. Anyway, the one thing that I wanted to stress is that we are speaking a lot about the gains of automation, but we need to address the costs, and the costs are rather serious. Okay, and I totally agree with what you said about ethics by design. Let's say, it's, for me, is very interesting. Another topic that we miss is auditing. That we need to have transparency in order to understand specifically why those decisions or why those recommendations are being deployed. And the third one is something that it interests me personally as a journalist, because look, I want to realize what the problems are in our profession, in our, let's say, yes, in our profession, because the media are in crisis, in a constant crisis, as the trust to media outlets globally, and we are trying to understand why people don't trust the media, and I'm not sure it's the lack of their efficiency. It's the lack of their, productivity. They are they are productive enough and efficient enough. Okay, you will accelerate and you will help journalists, I'm sure. But the core problem, the problem of trust to media, which is eroded by those platforms, that we agree. It's a big part of the problem is that those platforms are killing journalism. Yes, it's a problem for us. We cannot compete this monster, let's say. So does our AI-powered journalistic tools, do they help us to be more independent, to be more fearless, to be more, let's say, thoughtful or wiser, or making the right questions? Maybe, I don't know. But the thing here for us journalists, is that we have to gain the trust. And media publishers, when you go to media publishers in Greece and you tell them, okay, I will reduce you 40% the cost, they will say, okay, there's a good chance here to get rid of some journalists too, because okay, that's what we do. We don't journalists are flies, Socrates flies. They're not very nice people. They tend to pose questions, and difficult questions. So do machines can pose those difficult questions that we need today? I doubt. You said that they're very smart parrots. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with all those things. But there's the only thing I have to say is that we need to address and to solve fundamental problems of journalism and of the media today. It's a big part of the problem globally. We have huge problems like climate change or anything, and journalists could play a very big role to this, maybe with the help of AI, but AI does not pose those difficult questions. We need to press the media to get in the profession, younger people, those talented people, not to fire journalists in order to get data scientists. Okay, they can coexist, yes, of course, in models like the New York Times subscribers models. But this crisis is very fundamental to our democracy's foundations.
Okay. I will start with where AI is helpful. And again, it's a parrot. Most of it's just a statistical. It's not just because it's a very complicated thing, and then I don't want to, in a way, diminish the efforts, all the data science put into this. But right now, AI solves problems in the so-called low end of the value chain. These are usually repetitive, similar tasks, which we can automate with a certain quality. So my experience when automation is involved into the editorial process, usually we decrease the cost of the repetitive tasks, but first we need, because of the human in the loop, which I mentioned, we need people to monitor the output. So this cost is kind of transformed into monitoring. And typically the media, they don't fire their journalists. They use them to create all the things you mentioned previously, which are usually in the high end of the value chain. All the analytical content, all the investigative journalism, all the data journalism, all those things which actually AI cannot do. When we started working with educated machines, we call them semantic technologies. And very fast, we discovered that actual semantics are not that much involved, especially in machine learning and deep learning. There are, but I still don't think that, and we invest into that sphere, but I still think that machines, we will need a lot of time to actually make them understand things the way people do, and or even to create intelligence which thinks the way we think. And the biggest challenge here is the thinking with analogies. People with better English than mine, please help me. This is in Bulgarian is через аналози. Not analog, but let's say that this telephone, we know that it's a telephone, and the machine could have the knowledge that this is a device for making calls. But let's say that if there is a wind right now in this room, and this paper will fly away, because we have this way of thinking, we can use this to just drop it on the paper and it will stay there. So machines are not thinking that way. And this is a huge challenge for them to, and for us to create this general artificial intelligence. Right now, each machine solves one small particular problem. And that's why we are targeting this. We are, my vision is that the AI should be used where there is a simple repetitive task involved. Otherwise, we are shooting ourselves in the leg. I am not really going to advocate to any publisher right now to fire journalists. If they do this, I'm going to criticize them that they don't have any idea how to use their talents in order to create more value for their companies and for their readers. That this will be the effort if suddenly they have more resources because they freed their journalists. I think that right now, when we are talking about the crisis in the publishers, everything started like 20 years ago when World Wide Web appeared. Of course, it appeared before that, but it became mainstream in the Balkans, particularly in the middle of the 2000s. And all the companies, they created their websites because they tracked that their listeners, they changed, and people don't want to buy newspapers or just sit on a particular moment and watch TV just to learn news. They wanted to read all of this constantly. So this kind of started to transform how people spend their time and their habits to inform themselves, and money slowly started to follow this behavior of the people who consumed media. After that, social media appeared, but that was not the big problem. The big problem was what happened in the financial crisis 2008 and 2009. This was a huge blow to traditional media. All the traditional publishers, they never recovered. Usually, and this was the great accelerator of this transformation. First of all, people moved more and more into social media, and at the same time, social media offered to small advertisers a way better deal. People who are involved into advertising, this is the way these companies make business, and they have different model called the so-called cost per click compared to the so-called cost per mile. The way they pay for advertisements. So this pretty much really threatened the way media made money. And almost more than 10 years, the traditional media, they didn't adapt that much. They still try, even publishers, they think that people will suddenly start reading papers again. They won't. Or people will be okay to pay on cost per mile. They won't. And they want, like all these advertisers, they really demand very precise targeting, etc. And that's by the way the reason why companies like Facebook, Google, etc. they hoard all of this knowledge about the behavior of their users in order to satisfy that desire. So media are into that storm. They're deprived of their traditional way. First of all, they're really they lose audience, and that's a huge blow for them. Second, they are starved because they don't receive that much investment. So they really need to constantly invest into innovation and find different ways of making money. And here I will say all the proper media should be businesses in order to be free of influence. If they're not a proper business, they're just in the business of influence. And I would say that a very significant portion, if at least in the Bulgarian media, they're like that. So if a media is not, if you're wondering how these people, how they do not starve, how they're making their money, it's not by subscription. They don't have advertisement on their website. There is somebody paying them in order to do that. So that's why I really think that in order for media to be independent, they should be commercially independent and making business. They shouldn't rely on their publishers to feed them. So my opinion is that still there is a lot and huge, enormous value and mission which the journalists have. They're the keepers of the truth, and that's true for society, but they're way threatened. So publishers, and that's on the business side, not on the editorial side, but publishers should be really investing as much as they can into innovation in order to keep journalism alive. And by the way, the third very big problem which we have right now in our societies is that our societies are a constant target of third parties, which have the interest that our societies are divided, because divided societies are weak societies. And again, I can visualize this in Bulgaria. Our society is extremely divided. Check the result of our latest elections. You will see that the biggest party is like 21%, and there are a lot of other players there. And the society cannot agree on simple tasks. Should we vaccinate or not? And actually kind of agrees that we shouldn't. And a part of this the Istanbul Convention, we didn't accept it. So this is it. Gala, please. Should I stop or?
I'm really sorry to interrupt you. I really like the discussion. It's very passionate. It's very really up to date and important. But because we really run out of time for our agenda, maybe if you can try to end up this question so that we can go to the break and then to the next panel. So I'll give you the floor to finalize your comments.
My opinion is AI is not going to save media. It's just one of the tools. Media and journalism will save media by thinking really innovative things, which get like especially keeping the truth, because that's a deficiency we have, especially in social media, and being contrapunct. A lot of people, by the way, say that they inform from social media, but actually they follow the profiles of traditional media in social media. So usually there is a media involved into social media, which people like click, read, but go back and comment in social media. But yeah, to say that, yeah, and media should not fire their editors. They should think, but constantly discover new models and way to monetize their audience. This could be events. This could be things like companies laugh at this, but things like Patreon. I'm sure that you know what Patreon is. This is the kind of donation support system where, and usually if you do something right, people value this. I don't like paywalls, by the way, because paywalls, especially if you're not New York Times, paywalls could pretty much destroy you because it will deprive you of your audience. Because let's say in Bulgaria, there are a lot of other companies which can try and substitute you in the place for your readers. But stimulating people to value and constantly, reoccurringly donate to you, that's a big thing. And by the way, the media I own, the majority of the money we make still comes from donations from our listeners. And that's enough to have a daily podcast and several weekly podcasts. And right now we have like five podcasts, and we finance this by donation plus advertisement. And our editorial policy is free. Nobody influences us. So really pretty much I think that things like this are way better. Yeah. And we don't have any AI, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I really think these community supported models are very good solutions for this kind of media distribution. All right, so I would love to continue this discussion because it's very interesting to me, but I'm afraid we have a lot of time focused on that, and we need a break in order to continue afterwards with group presentations that we look forward later. Okay, now it's time for a break, and we see you in 10 minutes. See you.
See you.